all of the turmoil and that darkness that we lived in, all of those different things. It was like God allowed me to see. It's like for a split second, yeah, but I got you through that.
Amen.
Wow.
Glory.
And I
Wow.
got you through that. I was working in your life
Mm.
when you were back
Wow.
in preschool underneath that tree,
Mm.
thinking about why you're here.
Mm.
When you were back in that
Wow. All
classroom
in.
deciding not to listen to this person, it was me.
Wow.
Wow.
I brought you through here.
Wow.
I got you here because I love you.
Mm.
Mm.
I love you, and I didn't make no junk.
Our guest today once lived a life of addiction, crime, and even homelessness for 25 years. Everyone that knew him felt sorry for him and wondered if things would ever change. But one day, God reached down out of heaven to the southernmost city of the United States and transformed his life
Amen.
completely. Now at 50 years old, God has fully restored his life, his marriage, his family, his health, and his mission. Today, he is a pastor, he's a church planter, and now he's able to touch hundreds of life throughout the Florida Keys and beyond. And we're excited today to have Pastor Max Sr. with us and talk about his miraculous story and his journey of faith.
Amen.
And I think the best place to start in any story is the beginning.
That's right.
So why don't you tell us a little bit about where did it all begin? You grew up in Key West, is that true?
I did. I grew up in Key West. I was born and raised here. I lived in a home. It was my mother and I had a brother. I have a brother. His name's Emmanuel. He's a younger brother, and it was us three. And my father was there for a period of time, and he was in and out. And they were married and divorced 3 times in a period of about 5 years.
Wow.
And it was a real abusive relationship. And then he finally just left the scene, and then it was just me, my mother, and my youngest brother. And as I like to say, we were the Three Musketeers. And it was just us three. And looking back now, it was a real special season of life, no doubt about it, but with a lot of struggles, no doubt. My mother and father, they married at a very young age and had me when my mom was 16 and my father was 17. And I'm sure that they wanted to do a good job, but they weren't equipped. And
Yeah.
because of that, there was just a lot of struggles in the home.
Well, why don't you give us a quick summary of your youth? You know, what not just like what it was like in Key West, but what's going on in your home? It's just your mother, it's just your brother and you. Just give us a short story
Sure.
of your youth.
Well, when you grow up in an abusive home and it produces a lot of insecurity and a lot of fear. And I can look back now and see that that's the things that I was struggling with. But when you see your father, abusing your mom and all of the different things that were involved, and my mother, she would fight back. So that would make things a lot worse. And but when you grow up in a situation like that, it just causes a lot of insecurity and a lot of fear. And because I dealt with those things, I had to struggle with those things. It just produced a lot of inner turmoil. And because I had that inner turmoil, it just seemed like I was always trying to fit in with different groups of people, but really never found a place where I would really seem to fit in, and just led to all kinds of problems. I was arrested at 11 years old.
Wow.
And arrested countless times, sent to detention centers and programs and all of those different things that are involved with that. Was constantly fighting, and all of the problems that went along with that, and being suspended, and it was something. It was tough.
When would you say that, things took a turn for the worse?
Well, at a very young age, as I was growing up, and everything around me was surrounded in a drug culture. Down here in Key West in the 80s,
That's true.
you've probably heard, or maybe not, about the cocaine cowboys and all of the different things. There was a huge smuggling culture here in Key West. And my father was wrapped up in that culture, along with a lot of people, even politicians and people in the city council and all of those different things. It was just really a way of life. So all of those things were really just glorified.
Yeah.
And that's the world that I lived in. And I was raised where people openly used drugs in front of you and drank alcohol and all of the parties and all of those different things. And so I was around that. And then by being around that, I naturally just fell into it. And as soon as I fell into it, it immediately grabbed me
Yeah.
because I just felt so much fear, so much insecurity, so out of place, so much inner turmoil that as soon as I was able to take something that would alter my mind, I didn't have to think about those things just for a brief moment. And I just got caught up in this lifestyle of just seeking pleasure and really just everything that goes along with that lifestyle that really isn't based in reality.
Right.
And it just caused me all kinds of problems that just kept escalating, getting worse and worse and worse as I became more and more addicted.
At what age are we talking about you being addicted to these kind of things? What age are you using them on a regular basis? And
Yeah, I started dabbling with marijuana at about 11 years old. I didn't really get addicted to it till I was about 13 and a half, something like that. And then I was really got to the point to where I was about 14 and literally at that point I was just whatever I can get my hands on
Yeah.
was basically what I was doing. Marijuana, pills, cocaine, anything that I can get my hands on. And you never think that you're going to go as far as you end up going. You never end up believing that you're going to be addicted.
that's true.
I always told myself, well, I'll never do this. I'll never,
Yeah.
become this person and all of those different things. But little by little, you just lose yourself. I think about, just, being young and I had certain things in my life. I had family and, a loving family that loved me. They had their problems just like any other family. And I had friends and all of those different things that people grow up with. But little by little, as you get further and along in addiction, you start to take those things for granted and you begin to lose those things. And that's what ended up happening with me. Little by
So
little, I just kept losing.
what about this? When did you meet my mom?
Mm-hmm.
Your wife, and how did you meet her? How did all of that kind of get started?
Yeah.
Because that was also incredibly young.
Yes. Yep. At this point, I believe that I've been married 32 years. Could be 33 coming up. I
Amen.
believe so. In about a month or so. And been together 35 years.
Wow.
It's
And
amazing.
I was 15 and she was 14 years old. And we met. And we met in the high school in the ninth grade. And we began to just speak and all of those different things that young people do. And yeah, and she began to ask me things about the Lord. That was one of the things that she, right away, she asked me, "Are you saved?"
Wow.
And I said, "Saved from what?" and
We hear that a lot now.
and she says, "Well, don't you know that about Jesus and what Jesus did to save you?" And I didn't really understand the terminology, so I just simply told her, "Yeah, I believe in God, and I believe that Jesus is God." And that's something that that was a decision that I chose to believe in at a very young age. I know that my story is a little bit unique in a way when I tell people the struggle that I had from a really young age isn't really that common, but I really lived with a lot of just the best way that I can describe it, inner turmoil and a lot of darkness. And from a young age, even before I actually got into the public school system, so that's really young. You're talking about probably 5 years old, something like that. And And I remember thinking to myself, struggling. I would see my peers playing in a playground, and I would find myself just standing underneath this tree and just thinking to myself, why am I even here?
Wow.
And I began to ask my mom different questions, and why are we here? You know, what's going to happen when we die, and all of these different things. And my mom, she just simply says, well, when you die, you just you go to heaven to be with God. And if you're bad, you don't go there. You go to hell. And it was just simple kind of little things like that. And it somewhat made sense to me. But I had a grandfather, and who played a huge part in my life. Really, the closest thing that I had to a real father. That, by the way, was the most moral man that that was ever around in my life. Very unique man. He migrated from Cuba when he was about 21 years old. He came over here.
I got a picture of him right here. Little Maximo.
Yeah,
Something. Got a picture of him holding the chicken.
that's something. Yeah, yeah.
He was Maximo the third.
Yep,
Your
that's
dad's
right.
the fourth. You're the
Yep,
fifth.
I'm the fifth,
sixth.
and he's the sixth. That's true.
That's something, huh?
It is something. He was a special man, and he was a real hard worker. He came from communist Cuba, and he loved America. He lived firsthand through communism and the effects of communism. So when he got over here, he basically made it his business to search out and to live out the American dream, and that's what he did. He was a huge patriot. Worked 3 different jobs, ended up buying a home, and
It's incredible.
very moral man. If he told you he was going to be there at 5 o'clock, you can count on his little yellow Toyota pickup truck being out there 10 to 15 minutes before, like clockwork. He never sped. If you traveled with him anywhere, you just know that he did not speed. He did not believe in
He really had
speeding.
something in him.
Wow.
Wow.
He really did.
That's something.
He was a real hard worker. He never told me that he loved me. He didn't have to. I just knew that he loved me.
Wow.
And I can tell that he loved me because he genuinely enjoyed my company.
It's amazing.
And that's something that I've really never, ever been able to get away from. I sit and I think about, it wasn't anything that he just worked up. He just, enjoyed my company.
Wow.
And he just would tell me, because he grew up in communist Cuba, I asked him a few things. He says, no, when you die, and that's it. And he says, we came from monkeys and this and that. So I was like caught in these two worlds.
Confused.
Yeah, I had my grandfather telling me these things, and then my mom, and then my great-grandma who raised my mom, because my mother's mother, my grandmother, died when she was 34 from a cirrhosis of the liver. So she was raised by her grandmother, my great-grandmother. And she was like the patriarch of our family on our mother's side. Real special lady. Her name was Abuela Angelica. And
I have just a few small memories with her. I do remember standing in the hospital by her bed when she was passing.
yeah, when we brought my son home from the hospital, we actually lived with my great-grandma.
Wow.
And it was like walking back, 100 years. When we brought him from the hospital, there was no AC in that
Wow.
that home that we were living in. There was no screens, anything like that. And but that's where we brought him in. But I would talk to her and ask her, and she would openly speak about God, and she says, no, there is a God, and if you have faith in Him, you can go to heaven. And she even explained to me the somewhat about the Trinity.
Wow.
She understood enough that that there was God the Father, God the Son, and God the Holy Spirit. I'm sure she didn't understand it all, but by faith, someone had taught those things to her. She believed them to be true, and she told me those things. So I had this conflict that was going on inside of me that just kept festering.
Yeah.
That's the best way that I can describe it. It got to the point to where I got so depressed. And at this point, it was in the mid 80s, early to mid 80s. And we were in the middle of a Cold War with the Soviet Union. And there had been all kinds of talks about, maybe a nuclear conflict that would end the world and all of these different things. And I'm just sitting there thinking to myself, man, if this thing just ends, what is going to happen? Like, my grandfather saying, we're just going to go back and just go back to the dirt. My grandma, she's telling me about God and all these things. But I mean, I don't really understand what's going on. But I knew this. I said, there has to be more. There's no way that I can feel the way that I feel about my mother, about my Tia Lulu, about my Tia Lisa, about my great grandmother, my abuelo Maximo, my abuela Alicia, and my immediate family members. There's just no way that I can have these feelings and that the life that I'm living really just isn't gonna amount to anything. But I just didn't know. So I was dealing with those things and not really having any clear answers. This really started to affect me. I became disconnected, was really struggling with pretty severe depression at a very young age. And my mother, the Lord used my mother in a very special way. And she ended up writing me a 9-page letter.
Wow.
9 pages.
Wow.
And it's an amazing thing.
That's
She
something.
wrote this 9-page letter to me,
That is something.
just explaining to me how much she loved me and that God was real and that, that we could have faith in him and that he could be trusted.
Wow.
And that there was a life worth living and that our family was special and unique and that we needed to rely on God and on one another. And it's something because she put those things in me from a young age.
That's amazing.
She really showed me the input, and she always spoke with real simplicity. And you both know my mom, but she doesn't complicate things. It's just really
Straight
simple.
from the
It's
heart.
just like, yeah,
Bam.
no, there's,
Cut
yeah,
it dry.
there is a God, and he loves you, and you just got to have faith in him. And she just, really put an emphasis on how unique and how special our family was, and that we needed to do what we can to protect one another and love one another. And at the end of that 9-page letter, I was able to, get out of that depression
Wow.
enough to the point to where I was able to function. And I still had these anxieties that I was dealing with that I don't think most children were dealing with or young people. But looking back now, I'm certain that it was the Lord that was working in and through all of those things.
Yeah.
I had these questions and these desires and this insecurity, these fears that aren't common, especially with somebody that age. Those things I kept, and I think that's why I probably went into the world of crime, and because there's a lot of crime that I was involved in, just breaking into things, stealing, setting things on fire. I lived in a fist fight, probably had a couple of hundred fist fights, just from a young kid to a throughout a teenager to early adult. It was just what it was.
Right.
And but I think that's, I didn't want to, I did anything that I had to do, really and truly, not to think about that feeling of, really, why am I here? What am I doing here? And what does it really matter?
Wow.
So it's like, so anything that would take my mind off of that, even just for, a moment or two, that's what I just gave myself to. And that's what I did. So it started causing me all kinds of problems. I remember getting into middle school and sitting inside of a science class. And as I was sitting in the science class, the teacher, he began to try to teach what he had been taught, that, evolution, and that we have evolved from monkeys and all of these different things. And I remember sitting there and all of the students there and just all of them listening and paying attention to these things. Now, mind you, at this point, I'm probably about 11, 12 years old, something like that. And I remember sitting here and listening to this science teacher, uh, give his opinion, his ideas about why we're here and ultimately where we're going to go. And I remember making, at first, as he's saying these things and teaching the class, the best way that I can describe it was that I felt like somebody had stuck a knife in my stomach. Because I didn't, these are things that I had been battling with since a young kid, just this inner grinding inside of me. And I made a conscious decision right there at that point that I was not going to believe that. And nor would I listen to him,
Wow.
nor let him influence me
Something.
at all. Now that's pretty, but
Amazing.
that's what I did. So basically, I just decided
Shut them up.
to shut him off, and that was not what I was going to believe. It was crystal clear to me that there had to be a God, and that there was a rhyme and a reason for life, and that was nonsense. So
That's something. Do you think that's because of what was put inside of you at younger, or?
I think so.
Yeah.
I think that the inner turmoil that I had, the fear, the questions, and then obviously the family that I had, and what I was experiencing, those things that I was going through, I can see it now, God working in and through all those things. I know that it isn't common, but it was a real struggle that I had. And I just chose that I was not going to, not only him, I would not allow anyone from that persuasion to influence me.
Wow.
So basically, if you were somebody that said you didn't believe in God, well, you better believe something. You weren't going to be too close to me.
Sure.
And I don't.
Yeah.
It's just
That's something.
I knew that there had been
Right.
Yeah.
You know
So-
what's really interesting though is still in America, 2026, most people don't believe in evolution, and that's the only thing they've been taught for almost 100 years now,
It's true.
since the Scopes trial, and there has obviously something in people
Yeah.
It's true.
That's
that
that's
just
not true. Right.
rejects that,
Yeah.
and in the face of so much of that being poured into them,
They know.
God has put something in us.
Right.
It's true.
And there is, a general knowledge of this truth in our own programming, which is incredible. But you can help us continue this. But so basically, the struggles that you face, the struggles that we faced together growing up, really didn't begin with us. They didn't begin with you. It has been going on in our family for generations. I mean, your grandmother died at 34. That's when your mother was about 8 years old.
Yeah.
Because cirrhosis of the liver from drinking.
Yeah. Her father, my grandfather, died of cirrhosis of the liver,
Yeah.
early 50s.
Wow.
And
And then your mother had multiple nervous breakdowns,
Yep.
battles with addiction her whole life,
Yep.
even to early 50s, losing
Definitely.
her memory.
yes.
And so this is really something that has been going on and culminating for generations in our family. And then at the same time, you've had, everyone knows you're a really intense man. I mean, everyone who knows you at all, understands that there's a lot that is going on inside of you. And really what you're doing is unpackaging some of that for us. You're explaining that. You're helping us to really understand that's not just who you are today. That's really how you've always been. And these things have been moving about you, powerful movements in you for a very long time. And they have been guiding your life. And somehow now they're all culminating together and being harnessed for the right things, for the best things. And that's amazing. But before we talk about that, I think you should now just say a few things about, when things really were moving towards like the lowest point in your life.
Right. So you met your wife at a young age.
Yep.
Got together, got married, and you have 4 children: Max, Tatiana, Talia, Talissa.
As a teenager, I mean,
Yeah.
multiple children,
Yep.
married.
And then, of course, you're still living in this environment, and things really started to go downhill, and you really got to like that real lowest point. Why don't you talk about that and that circumstance when you were all the way down, and some of the things that were taking place, like some of the things you did, some of the struggles you were having right at that point,
I mean, not all of it can be said. It was 25
No, of course,
years.
yeah.
But, some of it
Right.
can
Well,
be said.
as you're growing up, you're always thinking that, what you're looking for is right ahead. And I desperately wanted to grow up, and I thought that when I grew up and I became a teenager, that, my life would be what I hoped that it would be. And when I got married at 17. My wife was 16. She was 16 when she had you. And
Yeah.
and I thought that, well, this may be what it is, and but it really wasn't. And then you have children and all of those different things, and throughout that period, my addiction just got worse and worse and worse, and it was just a horrible way to live. I lived in real darkness for a real long time. Just really got to the point to where I just was living an isolated life. I got to the point to where, it was no longer fun. Um, I lost my friends. I couldn't be trusted. Nobody really wanted to spend time with me or be around me because they didn't know what I was going to do or what was going to happen. So just little by little, I just got into this place of just darkness and isolation and just being so hopelessly addicted. And there were times where I desperately tried.
Yeah.
I mean, I tried with everything in me to really quit and to stop. And there were brief periods where I was able to do that for a couple of days. There was at least 2 times that I was able to do it for even a few months. And but ultimately, I would go back.
Wow.
And I would always just just really just pick up right where I left off. And it's just and just go right back. It was just an instant thing, just right back to that bondage and to that
Yeah.
darkness. And there's really no way to describe the life really that we lived. He was there.
Yeah.
My daughters were there. And looking back now, I know that the Lord really used all of that because my wife, she really lived by faith, and she lived her faith out. And I don't know how the Lord works in all of those things. I don't really understand it, but I do know now that He worked in a very unique way in our home because my children were able to see their mom's faith, but they were also able to see the
Right.
darkness that I
A
lived
big
in.
contrast there.
Yeah, a huge contrast. And it was a very unstable home. To this day, I sit and I think about, they knew, just walking into the room, like they can just like
They can see what
literally,
was going on.
like they can know, like, okay, can I speak to Dad? Can I say anything? They literally grew up in this world where they had to walk on eggshells. Real extreme pressure. Now, amazingly, the Lord has used that in their lives
True.
because they have great discernment.
Yeah.
They can read a room.
And able to function under high pressure.
Yeah, able to function under high pressure, able to relate with people, able to demonstrate compassion.
True.
And I see that now that, even in all of that dysfunction, like only God can,
Right.
He was working in and through all of that. But ultimately, I just kept, going deeper into all of these different things, and couldn't hold a job, had to have these drugs, and if I didn't have it, I was extremely sick, and I'd have these withdrawals, and I would go to detoxes and drug programs, and I'd get arrested for stealing or doing this and that and the other, and all of
Seizures you had.
seizures. I mean, yeah, the ambulance would come and have to take me to the house, take me to the hospital if I was trying to withdraw, get off. It's just such a
Right.
unstable home environment, and just such uncertainty, poverty. I mean, there's just really no way to even try to begin to describe what it means to live in that place, because I really lived in a place where there really wasn't any hope
Yeah.
whatsoever. And
Right.
that's how I lived for a really
And
long time.
you mentioned, recently there were several times where you tried to get out, you
Hmm.
tried to break the addiction. And I know that you went to, dozens of rehabs and programs, talked to
Yeah.
therapists, and none of them really seemed to work
Right.
except for one.
Right.
And that one was in Texas. Why don't you tell us a little bit about like that decision to
Sure.
go and, the beginning of that program in Texas?
Absolutely. It does something to you when you really want to stop something, but you can't, and
Mm.
you give everything that you can, but you fall short. And that was the story of my life. I believe that God could work a miracle. I believe that He even worked miracles for other people,
Mm.
but that was just not going to be the story of my life.
Mm.
Yeah.
That's what I had believed because I had tried so much. So I was really just a shell of a man.
Hmm.
I was defeated. I was empty. I was broken. I had no self confidence whatsoever, and just really just empty.
Yeah.
And really tried all of these different things, really with no hope of the future. And eventually, through a series of circumstances, I got to the place to where I was so desperate that I actually chopped off my own finger.
Mm.
And now I know that that sounds crazy, and it really is. It is. But that's where I got. I got to the place to where I literally, I was I just got this big butcher knife and just literally just chopped off my finger.
Mm.
And
That was my
yeah,
senior
you're a
banquet night.
senior in high school
Wow.
when that happened. And that kicked off a series of all kinds of things, restraining orders, going to jail, um, people getting into our home and DCF and all of these different things and all kinds of pressures and people just telling my wife, look, you need to leave this lunatic. He's dangerous, and all of these different things. So that really put me in even a darker place to where eventually I could not even be at home. I could not be around my family, and of course the addiction just started getting worse and worse and worse. And at that time, my son had just gotten married, and he had went to the Crown College of the Bible. I was no longer living at home. I could not be there because of the restraining orders and whatnot, and all of this, just the darkness of the different things going on. And while I was up there, I was living in a well, he was while he was up there, I was just living in this little makeshift shed in the back of someone's yard.
Mm.
It was just real poor living conditions, and I remember my son wanting to help me, and he said, "Look, the Lord's really working at this Temple Baptist Church. This is an amazing thing. What's going on up there?" By the way, he had just gotten married, literally just I mean, literally maybe a month and a half, 2 months, just gotten married, just got up there, and he's telling me, he says, "Well, maybe you need to." Go to a detox or something like that. And I said, well, I'm not going to go to a detox. I can detox myself. And he was concerned for me. He says, well, when you try to detox, you have those seizures and all of these different things. He says, if you're not going to go to a detox, he says, you can't go home. He says, why don't you just come up here uh, and I'll help you,
Mm.
detox, and you can go to church with me up here. He had just gotten married. And I said, okay, I said, I think I can do that. And I agreed to
You'd never
go.
left the state of Florida at that time,
No,
right?
I had never left the state of Florida
Yeah.
at that time. It's the first time I had ever left the state. And it was something. It was an experience. The tickets were bought and these things. And
Remember the one building there in the downtown area with the stairs that we climbed up at the top?
I do remember.
The black stairs
Yeah,
that we went on. Oh, yeah.
I do remember.
That's something,
Yeah.
man.
Yeah, it was something. It was something. That was a very unique trip. It was very unique. It was I've been in a place that I had never been, seen things that I had never seen, but I was in complete darkness.
Yeah.
And if you've ever struggled with any addiction, the only thing that you can think about is when are you going to engage in that thing that you're addicted to. So it's like, everything revolves around how much do you have, when are you going to run out, and how can you get more? Period. There's no, that is the dominating thought. And when you get to that place where you can't provide for those things, and you have these great physical withdrawals, and then the depression, and there's a spiritual component to it, and all of those different things. So it was unique in the way that I was able to spend time with you up there, see all of those different things. But I was really going through one of the worst seasons of my life, where everything was just hanging in the balance. And when I went up there, I took a bunch of drugs. And I explained to my son, I said, look, I said, I'm going to take these drugs. And I had a bag of drugs, and I had them broken down. And like, you know, I said, well, look, there's about 2 weeks here worth of stuff. And how this is going to work is that you're going to give me this in the morning. And then, and then the next day you'll give me this, and then the next day
a little bit less.
yeah, you're going to give me this, and you're going to give me this, and that, and that lasted for about 2 days. And then I basically,
The funny thing is these are all things are going, and then I'm getting in the car and driving to Crown College, just hitting my Bible classes and all
yeah, it's
the
true.
things that are swirling on. It's
Wild.
Yeah,
it's pretty funny.
he's just got married.
Right.
He's in Bible college. He's trying to help me,
It's
like
pretty
really, really help me.
pretty funny.
He's holding the drugs. He's praying with me. He's reading me scripture, and just really wanting this thing to work. And I wanted it to work.
Yeah.
I mean, I desperately wanted it to work. It wasn't like I didn't want it to work. I just, like, when you're in that deep of addiction, you just need something that is beyond what you can do.
Yeah.
And I had lived like that for so long. It was like I just couldn't see the way out. And it was like day 2, or it was right away. And I basically told him, I said, look, this isn't going to work. It ain't working out. What you're going to do is just give me all of the drugs, and I'm going to take them all. And then I'm just going to go cold turkey.
Wow.
And he said, Dad, that's not a good idea. That's not what you agreed to. That's not going to work. And I was just relentless. I would not stop. And basically just drove him crazy. And he gave me the drugs, and I took the drugs. And I knew immediately that it wasn't going to be enough. Now I had nothing, and was just having to come to terms with the reality of my life and where it had brought me to, what I had lost. I lost my family. At this point, I was very physically sick. My body wasn't working. My mind wasn't working. It was just a wreck in every area of life. And having to come to terms with those things was really scary, and not having a way that I could see to, bring any kind of relief to it just brought even more anxiety.
It's something.
And then at that point, in that moment of desperation, I began to threaten him. I began to say things to him that I should not say. And began to threaten him. And I remember lunging at him, and him getting up out of the recliner, and just kind of, he ran out of the front door and down the steps, the flight of stairs, and was in the parking lot. And I could still see him. He had the phone in his hand, and I just went out to the balcony. I said, "Oh, you're going to call the police on your dad? That's what you're going to do? You're going to call the police on me?" He said, "Dad," I just want you to calm down. And I said, "Well," I said, "come on up. It's all good," and this and that. And was able to get him back upstairs, and I said some things that I'm not even going to repeat. It's just so awful, that a father should never tell a son. And I attacked him, and he defended himself. And I ended up going to sleep. He knocked me out, and had to call the police and all of those different things. And when the police got there, they woke me up and took me to the hospital and all of those different things. And from the hospital, I ended up on the street and
In Knoxville,
in
man.
Knoxville, and I ended up behind a gas station. And
That's a different world
it's just
than
yeah,
Midwest, that's for
yeah,
sure.
whole different world, big city, really not surrounded with anything or anyone, and just all alone, and really just having to trying to make sense out of anything. And after that, ended up making it into a shelter in Knoxville. And in a process of time of being in that shelter, that's where that opportunity was open for me to go to this Christian based program
It's amazing.
in Corpus Christi, Texas. And the opportunity had opened up. I agreed to go, and uh, I wanted to be free, but I was just so addicted. I didn't even know what that looked like, how that would work. I just had no hope of ever being someone that was completely drug free. And the day came, and my son and a man, Roger, picked me up at this homeless shelter and drove me to the airport. And I remember, you know, asking my son, trying to get some money from him, and just tell him, look, I need some money for some food and all of those things. And I remember he gave me $60, $60, and in a suit. And I mean, I was in such bad shape, like literally. I was so screwed up. My mind didn't work. I just could not even think or do the most basic things. I remember them bringing me to the airport and my son speaking to the people, trying to explain that I'm his father and that I'm getting ready to go to this place to get help, and the people are just like looking at me like, what's wrong with him? Like what is wrong with him? Like, is he normal? Like, what is the issue here?
Wow.
Well, because he isn't going to be able to find the gate. He can't do this. He can't. And I just couldn't. I could not do the most basic things in life, and I couldn't. And there was a long time. I had been living like that for a long time. I couldn't even do the most basic things
Yeah.
in life. I had lost all of the ability to do those things. And as soon as they dropped me off and left, I made my way to the airport bar there, and I started buying liquor. And liquor's real expensive in the airports. So I bought what I could and got on the plane, made it on the plane, and then got to Houston. And at Houston, I was supposed to get on another plane and ended up missing that plane because I was at the bar trying to get a drink and to buy a drink. And I just missed the plane and all of the different things and didn't know how I was going to get back over there. And I remember being at the Houston airport and going up to the bartender and ordering a double shot of Bacardi rum, and he charged, it was like 15 something, and I literally handed him like, it was like 10 or 11 bucks, and just like, look, this is what I got. And I just drank it really quick and just handed it to him, and he's just like looking at me, he's like, you're short. I'm like, whatever, what I mean? It was just like, and that was it, and that's just how it was. And that was the last drink that I had. It was that was right there in that Houston airport. And then I just, from there, it was I got on that plane, and I made it to Corpus Christi, and it was picked up over there by a couple of people and took into the Lester Roloff men's home. And that's where I made it into that program. And it was something. Uh, it was a real rundown facility. Everything was really run down, torn down. I mean, just basically, I mean, I don't even know. It was in bad shape. All of the food that we got was basically donated, from, like, different things and all of these different things. It was a place where,
How many men were there, would you say?
when I was there was probably about maybe 8, something like that. Yeah, like 8 people, like, you know what I mean? Like 8 people.
Huh?
And you know what? And all of them, nobody wanted them. Like literally, like they had gotten to the place to where, and it was sad because, like they had literally nobody wanted them.
Wow.
They didn't have, and that's where I found myself. I was in this place and surrounded with these things and I'm just there, and it was just such a struggle, such inner turmoil. I remember the pastor that was running the facility, and it was a part of the church that he was there. He came and he spoke with me and he prayed with me, and all of those different things. And I was just thinking to myself, yeah, I mean, I would really like for something to happen, but I just don't see how it's going to be. And I was so addicted to these drugs, and I was so scared that basically what was going to happen was I was so physically sick, my mind wasn't working right, that I was afraid that I was going to die. I was afraid that I was going to withdraw and die.
Wow.
And have a seizure and end up dying, like hitting my head or something. So for 45 days, about 45 days, I literally was bouncing off of the walls of this place. Like I would take these little steps, and just, I couldn't do anything. And they made everybody work in that place.
Yeah.
They used to take care of a trailer park, probably like 20 miles away, something like that. So the men would, go over there, take care of that trailer park. And then this was on a farm where we were staying. So there was always something that needed to be done on the farm, mowing, weed whacking, and all of those things. For 45 days, I did not leave basically this little area because I was just so sick and not, and I'm sure they're thinking to themselves, well, I don't know what's going to happen with this guy. This guy's just like literally like he's comatose. He's done. He's probably just going to die. We're going to wake up here and, he'll be dead and he'll be gone. Because everybody's like progressing in certain levels, and like, they're getting better. Right. You can see them. They had like a little weight pile in the back, and some of these men would mess around and do some of these things, and here I am just like a shell of myself, just barely holding on, surviving, no hope whatsoever.
So when was the change? Like, what was the thing that happened where everything changed, that the turning point moment?
Absolutely. While I was there, we had to listen to Lester Roloff, and we had to listen to his sermons, and one was like a shorter little clip or something that we'd listen to like in the morning, and then it was like a couple of times a week we would have to sit and listen to something else that was a little bit longer. And mind you, when you're in that program, you're going to the services of the church, and they had a chapel service where there would be a visiting preacher that would come by and would preach and whatnot in this setting. But I was just listening to this preaching, listening to the preaching in the church, listening to the preaching the preachers would come that were preaching in the chapel, and listening to Lester Roloff preach and all of these different things. And I was just like, he presented the answer. He presented the solution.
Wow.
He presented a mighty Savior,
Amen.
a great God,
Amen.
Wow.
a mighty God, that with him all things are possible. And these things just began to just hammer on my heart. Now, mind you, no one else felt this way about this kind of preaching.
Wow.
I'm surrounded with all of these other guys,
Wow.
and they're just like sitting
Heads
there
down.
like this is so outdated. This is nonsense.
Wow.
They hated the preaching at the church and
Wow.
all of those different things. But I was just listening.
Soaking it in.
Yeah, just listening and you know, I'm like seeing some kind of hope. I'm like, wow, man, this could be it. I mean, wow, this is true. I mean, man, anything. I mean, this really is. I never really experienced those kind of things in that magnitude, and I guess in the situation that I had been in. And God was working in and through that. And then it was a chapel service. It was a guy that actually was one of Lester Roloff's preacher boys. At this point, this guy was about 90 years old.
Wow.
And he came over there and he'd preach chapel. And he'd come and he'd start off every time he would preach, he would sing that famous Lester Roloff choir, "It's a battlefield, brother, not a recreation room."
Wow.
He would just
He would just
begin
sing it.
by singing that,
Wow.
and then he'd just start speaking, and then all of those different things. And I remember, you know, he just always did the same. He preached the gospel and all of those different things. But God had just been working.
Yeah.
After that chapel service, at that moment in time, I'm just starting to get a little bit of clarity.
Wow.
A little bit. Like a little bit of clarity. Like, okay, I'm not going to die. This ain't going to be the end of the story.
Wow.
I'm going to there's another chapter. There may be another chapter yet. Now, you know, it just is what it is. So the cobwebs and just a little bit of clarity, getting out of that thing and listening to all of this preaching and then this man, you know, preaching the gospel, all of these different things. And I remember leaving that chapel and then going out, and it was in the back of this, you know, this building, and the back door would open up. And then, you know, right after the chapel service, there was a group of guys over there that they started to go mess around with the weights and all of these different things. And I just went out there to the back of this field and was just looking out at hundreds of acres of wide open, just land. And I began to think to myself, well, you have to be here for a certain amount of time. And there's just no way around that. So you just got to get out of here. And when you get out of here, you can go back home. And instead of engaging in all of the hardcore drugs that grounds you down to absolutely nothing, you can just drink and smoke grass on special occasions. And when it's a holiday, like, whatever, birthday, Thanksgiving, Christmas, or whatever, you can get a hold of those things that you really, really want. And as long as you have a job and you work, your wife, wife, I mean, because you've never lived like that.
Yeah.
I mean, that would be like that was the miracle.
Yeah.
Like that for me
Yeah.
was the dream.
Yeah.
That was the goal. Because the idea of being completely sober, that was not in the cards for me. Like, I had lost that hope a long time ago.
Yeah.
As I'm rehearsing these things in my mind, I had a moment of clarity. One split second of clarity. And it was like God allowed me to recognize what I was saying was nonsense.
Wow.
That I was living a life of self-deception. I was deceiving myself. I had been telling myself these things for over 25 years, and I knew that it was not the truth.
Wow.
And I knew that it wasn't the truth, and I knew that that was not going to be the outcome. At that point, I had to come to terms with the reality of my condition, my life, the real condition that I was in, and that I ultimately needed God. I needed something that I didn't have.
Yeah.
And I felt so low. It felt like all of the energy had just been zapped, like just drained out of me. And the best way that I can describe it is that if I could have just went somewhere and just went to sleep and like not wake up for a month, like that's really what I wanted. I just wanted to just go somewhere. If I could just crawl underneath a rock, just flush myself down the toilet, just I didn't want to think anymore. I didn't want to live that life anymore. I was just completely empty. And I'm just this complete, I knew that those things that I was rehearsing in my mind, that was not the truth. And that I needed something else.
Yeah.
I just made my way back to the dormitory where I was staying in this run-down facility and got down to a cot. And literally, I just fell down and just began to cry. I just cried. I wept. I groaned. I thought about all of the things that I had been hearing. I recognized how lost and how hopeless I was. And I don't exactly remember what I said. I could not tell you what I said. But whatever I said, God knew that I meant it.
Amen.
He just knew that I meant it. And I literally just crawled up on this bed and just like covered myself. And I was just like, well, you know what? I don't know. Whatever.
Wow.
And amazingly, I don't know why I had this thought, but Lester Roloff was talking about fasting. He had been speaking about fasting. I don't know. I mean, I'm like thinking to myself, well, you've never done that. You know what I mean? So I get up the next day and I'm just like roll out of bed and I'm like, well, I don't know. I've never fasted. I've never prayed, but I'm just gonna start fasting. I'd eat once a day, real small meal. So I just wouldn't eat anything. Didn't really have much of an appetite anyway, and I just go to the church services, go to the Bible studies, read, praying, and all of these different things. And that's what I was doing. And I don't know why I did it. I really don't know why.
Yeah.
I just did. And it was about 2 weeks of me doing that. About a 2-week period, around that period of time in 2 weeks, that I was walking from the kitchen, and as best as I can describe it, it was about 2:30 in the afternoon from the lighting in the sun. I can remember the reflection coming in. I knew that it was in the afternoon, and I was making my way back to my dormitory in this open bay area where all of these men were staying. And on the way back to that area, I recognized that my life was never going to be the same.
That's amazing.
Now, I don't know how to, I did not know what the future held.
Right.
Yeah.
I just didn't know. I knew this. I knew that my life was never going to be the same.
Wow.
The obsession, the obsession that mastered me, that controlled me, that dominated every decision that I'd made had been lifted.
Woo!
Unbelievable.
It's amazing.
It's a miracle.
It's inexplicable.
I can't. So I'm thinking to myself, well, what am I gonna do? Like
Amazing
what?
that
Like
you
this?
had that
Yeah.
that persuasion.
Yeah,
you felt that.
I understood.
realization, yeah.
I understood. I got it. I knew that it was never going to be the same. And I've always tried. I've tried to explain this to my wife, and every time I've told her, and I've told her so many different times because I can't even really fully understand it. I haven't found a better way to articulate it. But I also knew that my life was no longer mine to live. I don't know. Like, there was no way that I would keep this freedom
Sure.
if I just went back to
back
my
to-
nonsense.
Right.
Like, went back to my just those old friends, those old places, those old things. The best way I could describe, I literally felt like a bird that had been set free.
Wow.
And the last thing that I wanted to do was go anywhere near that bird cage.
Right.
I
Wow.
mean, nothing. Immediately, I felt that God had worked this miracle in my life and that it had to be for a reason. It had to be that God wanted to use me
Amen.
to provide hope for others.
Amen.
And for a split second, I got really, really excited. And then immediately, these thoughts bombarded me and said, you can't do that.
Wow.
There's no way that you're going to be able to do that. At that point, you were in Bible college, and you were studying and growing, and the thought came to my mind, look, this isn't something that I'm going to do. This is something that my son is doing. And this is something that he's going to do, but this isn't something that I can do. You know, there's just, the situation ain't right. The circumstances ain't right. I've got too much baggage. There's too many things. And there's no way that's going to happen. But I'm sure that I can encourage people by my testimony and you know, and the life that I plan to live with my wife and with my family and those things. And that's really what I did.
Yeah.
That's what I did. I kicked that thought out of my mind as far as I could. And I came back to Key West, and when I got back to Key West, it just seemed like the world was wide open to me. The city,
life had just
yeah,
begun.
that
Yeah,
my
same
yeah,
man.
it literally, like, my life had just begun. Literally, I mean, when you're addicted from, like, you know, a young kid, that stuff messes up your mind, man. Like, you're stunted. You don't grow. You take things for granted. You're just like you're emotionally stunted. You're just you never developed.
Yeah.
You never grew up. And that was my story. And then I came back into town. I'm 39 years old, and I'm
Wow.
coming into the city, and the birds seem more beautiful than ever. I'm looking at the mango trees and the Spanish lime trees, and
Just a whole new life.
just the whole new. And I'm just like flabbergasted. I'm like, this is just amazing. This is unbelievable. Just best way that I can describe it is like my life had just begun.
Wow.
And
Did people who knew you before in the past life, did they instantly like know something was different about you? Did they say things like that to you?
I think that if they spent any time around me, they did.
Yeah.
Immediately, as soon as I came back into town, I lived right behind the people that used to sell me drugs. So, you know, I'd be riding to work or riding to the gym or whatever the case may be. And, you know, I would see them, and they would be over there in their group. And I just ride past them really quick. I'd wave, they'd come and tell me to come over there. And at first, they were definitely, the vast majority of them were really happy for me. Really genuinely happy because I was the guy. I was the worst one. Like, literally. You know, you got people that party and that were addicted, but I was really the guy that everybody felt sorry for. I was the dangerous guy. I was the guy that caused the problems. I was the guy that was just, I mean, it was just over the top.
Yeah.
So even the drug addicts,
Like, praise God, this guy.
yeah,
I'm happy
like
for
he
you.
really needed this.
They're wiping the sweat
This
off
is,
their brow.
yeah, like this is. I'm really glad he got this. And,
Oh man.
you know what I mean? And I'm just like, you know, I'm kind of like just doing my thing, and I remember I was at a local gym, and a guy came up to me and he asked me if I wanted a job. At that point, I was just working little side jobs. People would just put little like, you know, they just hire me for a day
Yeah.
or whatever the case would be to do some kind of labor work or whatnot. And then when I was there at this gym, he asked me, he says, well, do you got any consistent work? And I said, well, I really don't have any consistent work. He says, well, you know, I could put you to work. He says, and by the way, can you get these drugs?
Oh wow.
He says, I can get them at this price. Can you still get them? And I told him, look, man, I got saved. I said, I don't do that anymore. Said, the Lord's changed my life. You know what I mean? This is probably like, I don't know, maybe 2 weeks, 3 weeks after I'm home.
Wow.
And he just brushed it off. He's like, okay, that's good. You want to
Good
work?
for you.
You want to work? He says, I'll pay you $20 an hour. I said, all right, it's good. I remember I went home and I told my wife. My wife says, you can't work with him. You know, I've heard that, you know, he may be dabbling with these things. And I said, babe, I said, I'm good. I said, I'm not, you know what I mean? I'm not going to do any of, you know, I'm good. And she was really worried. And she was really, really worried for almost 2 years.
Yeah.
Wow.
Literally, if
Yeah.
if I stayed too long at work or after work, I'd go to the gym. She would text me. She would try to get in touch with me because she just naturally assumed
Right.
that I had gone back to my old ways.
She's lived with that for this
she
long.
she
yeah.
had lived like that for 25 plus years at this point. You know, and that's something else. It's like I knew what God had did in my life, but no one else knew.
Yeah.
Right.
I remember I remember my wife picking me up at the airport when I got home from Corpus Christi, Texas, and I guess she was waiting to see a guy dressed with a tie and like, yeah, you know, dressed up like this, and that isn't what she saw. She saw a very immature, to say the least, just a very immature man. And that had never developed, that had never grown,
Yeah.
and that it was just still like, yeah, I knew my life was never
Right.
going to be the same, but I knew no other life.
Yeah.
So I was dressed not good, and my thinking really wasn't, you know,
So
just
the change was really on the inside.
yeah,
not on the outside.
No, it was on the outside. It was on the inside. It was not on the outside. And so she didn't. She had nothing else to go by, and so it was difficult. She would always, you know, she was always just worried and checking up. And
Everyone was
every-
skeptical, to say the least.
yeah, everyone was. Yeah, I mean, it was so many different things that would happen.
Because what goes along with the life that you lived is becoming an ultimate deceiver, and an ultimate, you know, scheming and planning and positioning. And so that's just kind of what people assumed what was happening. Always there are things that
So
are going,
true.
you know, it's kind of like over here, but then all the things are happening over here. People suspected that that was what was going on. Even me and mom and everyone, we
Right.
just thought, you know, he's good. He's probably just even better.
Learn
Well,
some new
eventually
tricks.
it'll all come
Oh
out.
man,
That's
it's
something.
so true.
No.
It is something.
Eventually, you know, fast forwarding just a little bit, you ended up at the Marathon Baptist Church
Mhm.
and started really trying to serve God in a new way. Why don't you tell us a little bit about how you got there, what was going on, and
Absolutely.
you know, how you began to serve God?
Absolutely. Well, you know, I was growing. Little by little, I was growing. I was going to church with my family. I knew that, you know, God was dealing with me, was working in my life. There were things that I had to discover for myself. I grew up, you know, with not that much and really just constantly struggling. You know, when you grow up that way, you just seem to think that the grass is greener, like on the other side. So throughout all of this time, the guy that offered me that job, I'm working with him. And eventually I become 50%. I would make 50% of every job that he would get. Now, he was and is a contractor. I mean, he can build anything. He can do anything with his hands. Now, if you know me, and I know both of you know me, I can't do anything. Like, so basically I would work with this guy. I would help him. I would come up with prices and present things. I really was helping him in so many ways to be able to complete jobs in certain timelines and all of these different things. So there was this partnership that God had just worked, uniquely for really both of our benefits. And I can see it now that God was working in and through that. But in and through all of that, I was meeting people, was coming in contact with people, and I seen these people that had so many things. And I thought to myself, man, these people, they really are living a life. They've got these trucks, they've got these homes, businesses. But as I began to rub shoulders with them and spend time with them or work for them and be in their home, God was revealing to me and showing to me that what they had, that really wasn't much there. I had to learn that because I made a lot of
Because
money.
you wanted to pursue money.
I want
after this,
yes.
after
I
this
never
life of poverty.
Yeah, I just
that was the problem.
I wanted some.
This was now.
Yeah, this was so. I mean, I stacked up tens of thousands of dollars, and I'd keep it in shoe boxes in my home. I mean, I didn't trust the bank. And but God was dealing with me and showing me all of these different things, and then the time had come to where my wife and my family said that we needed to find another church. The church that they had been attending, there had been some kind of issues that they were not able to work through. And I remember my wife coming to me and telling me, look, there's these issues. We haven't really wanted to tell you these things because, you know, we know you probably won't handle it well and all of these is, but we can't go here no more. And I was just thinking to myself, whoa, where are we going to go?
Right.
I mean, I mean, where are we going to go? So through some research, we found out that there was some churches in the Marathon area.
About an hour away.
About an hour away. So we went up there, we went to one church, and we went to a service, and we recognized, you know, right away that it wasn't what we were looking for, what our family needed. And then and at this point, you know, faith is like everything to my wife. She knows the importance of these things. I knew that we needed a place to worship. I knew that we needed something.
Yeah.
And we went to that church and we're thinking to ourselves, well, what is going on? Like, that isn't going to work. So then we went back and we visited another church, and it was actually the Marathon Baptist Church. And we went up there the very first service, and, you know, we sat there and met with Pastor Nick and Miss Susan, his wife, and immediately, you know, felt very welcomed, very welcomed into the church.
That's amazing. So here you are then in Marathon Baptist Church and Pastor Nick. And was it really what you were expecting to find?
You know, it really wasn't. It was a little different than what I had been used to. But the Lord was definitely working in and through the church, and I was growing in my faith. As I said, we were making the drive up there. So, I mean, if you're going to drive that amount of time, it'd be foolish to just go up there and just spin your wheels. So I was definitely growing, and I guess Pastor Nick, he could see that. And then he came to me and asked me if I would consider teaching the children's church. And
How much time has transpired in this?
At that point, about a year.
About a year. So you're
About a
there
year.
faithfully a year,
Yep,
driving
yep.
an hour up,
Yep.
hour back.
Yep, driving up a
That's
couple of
commitment.
times. Yeah, a couple times a week. About a year. You know, I'm definitely growing, and you know, and then he asked me if I would be willing to do that, to pray about it. He was clear. He said, I want you to do it. He says, I don't want your wife to do it. I want you to lead the way in doing it. And then at that moment, you know, these thoughts began to actually, you know, re-enter my mind. Those thoughts that I had, you know, a couple years previous at that point, that the Lord wanted to use me and could use me somehow, some way in his work. But, you know, I'm thinking to myself, well, maybe this is it. You know, maybe, you know, God has saved me and has done this miracle in my life, because it was a miracle. Because the reality of it is that it's been 10 and a half years, and I've never had a thought, a serious thought of picking up a drink or taking a drug. Now, that's a miracle.
That's a miracle.
Like like never one time.
That's full deliverance.
Yeah, full deliverance. And so I'm thinking to myself, surely this is, you know, this is why these things have happened. Maybe it could be that me and my wife can be working in this children's church, and we can work together. And I'm starting to have these thoughts that this may be something. And I began to prepare a message on a weekly basis for the children's church. And it was all of those, those little Becca
stories
series,
of the
the
Bible.
stories of the Bible. That's basically how I learned all those stories of the Bible. And it was really, really difficult, man. It was hard. And I mean,
Were you a dynamic
no,
teacher?
it was horrible. And if you ask my wife, she would tell you he was the worst. I mean, it was so bad. Like literally, it was bad. Like, and it was like, I have like 10 kids there, like 5 years old, 6 years old, and trying to keep their attention, and and then those little stories that come with, like, like flashcards and
little pictures
all of these different things. It was really, really difficult, but God was showing me and teaching me, and I was essentially growing, preparing these messages on a weekly basis, and really just believing that this could be the thing that God had saved me and set me free for. And so this time is going by, and then I remember it was after church, and then I remember Pastor Nick. Several months have gone by at this point, and then he just comes up and he just says, "Can I speak to you for a moment?" I said, "Sure." And he pulled out a phone, and he said, "Look," he says, "I'm not going to be in town this day." He said, "I'd like for you to preach, if you could." And he said, "I want you to, you get some time, you think about it, you pray about it. If you can, you just let me know." The best way I can describe it is literally, it was like at that moment, right there, all of the links to the chain were connected. And it was like it had been full circle. Like literally it had become clear. Now, the thing that I was avoiding, the thing that I thought I would never do, the thing that I did not feel capable of doing, the thing that just seemed like just so far away, God had been working like only he can through all of these things. And here's this pastor of this church that thinks that I'm capable of preaching a sermon while he's gone. Literally, I'm like, wow, this is it. Like this is amazing. I can't even. This is so humbling. It's like,
I mean, evidently, over a year's time of faithfulness and teaching in Sunday school, he had seen things in you that maybe you hadn't even fully really seen in yourself, or that you were trying not to see. But his recognition of these things were really making it pretty clear.
Yeah, it's something. It seemed overwhelming, but it was like at that point, it was just like the links to the chain were connected. It's like I can see my life in totality, like all of the fear, all of the unstableness and the insecurity and the uncertainty that I lived in as a young child, growing up in an abusive home, watching my father and my mom fight, and all of the things that went along with that drug-infested environment, and what that produced in and out of jail, and all of the pain and the heartache and the death after death after death of people in my family dying due directly to addiction and that lifestyle. All of these different things, the ups, the downs, the hopes that I had that were foiled, the problems, the difficulties that I had with my wife, with you all in the home, just poverty, junk cars, the embarrassing things, embarrassing you, mom, your sisters, all of the turmoil and that darkness that we lived in, all of those different things. It was like God allowed me to see. It's like for a split second, yeah, but I got you through that.
Amen.
Wow.
Glory.
And I got you through that. I was working in your life when you were back in preschool underneath that tree, thinking about why you're here. When you were back in that
Wow, all
classroom
in.
deciding not to listen to this person, it was me.
Wow.
Wow.
I brought you through here.
Wow.
I got you here because I love you. I love you, and I didn't make no junk. As insecure as you are, as fearful as you are, Max, and I know you fearful, and I know you broken. I know you don't think that you're enough, but you're more than what you think. I love you, and I have a plan and a purpose for
Wow.
you. I want to use you to be my messenger.
Wow.
That's essentially what happened. And that was the end of one chapter
Wow.
and the beginning of a whole nother chapter of my life.
That's unbelievable.
And it's
And it's out of these things you began preaching there on a regular
Yes.
basis. You began sharing your testimony.
Yep.
You began witnessing to people on every job and seeing God save them. And out of these things is what leads eventually to the birth of the Southernmost Baptist Church. We're going to have to save this story, I think, for the next time we meet, because you've given us a lot of incredible things. And this story, I don't know what you call it. You know, it's your story. It's our story. It's our church's story. It's our family story. It's God's story. You know, and maybe out of darkness into light. We don't really know, but God is the one who deserves all the credit. He
true.
gets all of the glory. And let's just maybe wrap this up with you giving a final statement. Someone who's watching this, that may be where you were, they may be in that neck of the woods somewhere out there and thinks there's no hope. What do you say?
Well, as long as there's life, there's hope. And people struggle with many different things. I had my own personal struggles, but I know as human beings, we all have struggles. And eventually, what we need to understand is that God does love us, and that He did create us, and that He does have a plan and a purpose for us. And what ends up happening is that too many times people wrap up their identity with what happened to them, what others did to them, and or a job or a position, and that's not what they were created for. And but once you understand that God does love you, He does have a plan and a purpose for you, and that He's made a way for you to know Him personally. And as you begin to understand what it cost Him for you to know Him personally, and what that actually means, then that's where the freedom comes in, because it's like, at this point, I'm no longer this insecure little kid from the projects that just grew up within an abusive home and in a drug-infested environment that's just so angry, filled with turmoil, with no hope, uneducated, no hope for the future. No. Now you're looking at someone that has been adopted.
Yeah.
Someone that has been forgiven.
Amen.
Someone that has been redeemed.
Yes.
Yeah.
Someone that has a father that is a king. No, more than that, the King of Kings.
Yes.
And that He loves me and that He loves them. That's the answer.
Yes.
That is the solution. No doubt about it. It's Jesus Christ.
Amen.
And it's for anybody.
And it's for
It's for
anyone,
anybody, yeah.
anywhere. You know, a lot of times people think, well, that's really good for you.
Yeah.
You know, you were down and out, you were poor. No, it's for me, but it's also for the rich person as well.
That's true.
Wow.
It's
You-
for
it-
everyone.
it's for everyone, because you ask a rich person, well, I'm senator, well, I'm doctor. That's not what you, and we need them, and we need doctors and senators and lawyers and judges. We do, but that's not what you were created for. You were created by God and for God. And until you get that nailed down, you're always going to struggle. Some will struggle more than others.
Right.
But that's where we come in, and we've been
That's
given this
something.
responsibility
And
to reach
ultimately,
people.
That's why our family does what we do.
Exactly. It's true.
In every case that we see, every mother that we see struggling, wife that we see struggling, man that we see struggling, teenager we see struggling, senior every person that we see ourselves in them and in their
It's true.
struggle, and we know what God can do.
Mm.
And it's thrilling, isn't it?
It's thrilling.
Well, this has been a blessing.
Yeah, it has.
No doubt about it.